The stagecoach died 3 miles short of Silver Pine, which was typical luck for anyone stupid enough to travel the high passes in February. Alara Whitmore felt the axle snap before she heard it, a sickening lurch that threw her against the side panel hard enough to crack her temple against the wood. The driver shouted something lost to wind. Then the coach tilted, groaned, and gave up entirely, listing into a drift like a ship taking on water. She sat still for a moment, tasting copper, feeling the thin trickle of warmth above her left eye. The other passengers, a mining supply clerk and 2 brothers heading to work a claim, were already yelling, panic sharpening their voices into something animal. "Axles split clean through," the driver called down, and even through the howling wind, Alara could hear the defeat in it. "We ain't moving, not till this blows over or someone comes." The clerk, a soft-handed man named Pruitt, started talking about hypothermia, about how long a person could last, about the bodies they'd found last spring when the snow melted, perfectly preserved, still sitting upright like they'd just decided to take a rest. Alara tuned him out. She pushed open the door, had to shove hard against the wind, and dropped down into knee-deep snow. The cold hit like a fist. Not the crisp, clean cold of a winter morning back in Philadelphia, but something meaner, something that found every gap in your clothing and squeezed. "Miss Whitmore!" The driver leaned down, his face already raw. "You can't—" "How far to Silver Pine?" she asked. 3 miles, maybe less, but in this, then I'm walking." She said it flat, no room for argument, and started adjusting her bag across her shoulder. She'd packed light when she'd left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago, light for someone who'd never seen a real winter anyway. Now everything she owned was in this leather satchel, and it felt heavier with every step she'd taken west. "You'll die," Pruitt said from inside the coach. He'd pressed his face to the window, glasses fogging. "You'll get turned around, fall into a ravine, freeze before you make it halfway." "Probably." Alara pulled her scarf tighter. "But I'm going anyway." One of the brothers, the younger one, face still smooth, stuck his head out. "Why? What's so damn important you'd risk that?" She almost told him. Almost said because I sold everything I had to come here, burned every bridge back east, and wrote letters to a man I've never met promising I'd arrive in February, and if I don't make it, he'll think I changed my mind or died trying, and either way it ends the same. Almost said because turning back isn't an option anymore, hasn't been for months, maybe years. Instead, she just said, "Someone's waiting," and started walking. The wind tried to push her back. The snow tried to bury her. Neither succeeded at first. She focused on the basics. 1 foot, then the other. Keep the mountains to her left. Watch for the tree line that would mean she'd drifted too far north. The road was gone, erased under fresh powder, but roads were just suggestions anyway. People had walked through worse. "You're tougher than this," she told herself. "You crossed a continent. You left everything. This is just weather." But the cold had teeth. It found her fingers first, even through her gloves, then her feet, despite the wool socks and the sturdy boots she'd bought in Chicago. Her face went numb, which was almost a mercy, except it meant she couldn't tell anymore if she was still bleeding from the cut on her temple. The wind screamed. That was the only word for it. Not howled, not rushed, but screamed, high and furious, like something alive and offended by her presence. Snow came horizontal, stinging exposed skin, getting into her eyes until she had to squint nearly shut just to see 3 feet ahead. She kept walking. 1 foot, other foot, left foot, right foot. Her father had been a doctor, dead now, consumption, 3 years ago, which was when everything started falling apart. But he taught her things. Basic anatomy. How the body worked. How it failed. Extremities first, she remembered him saying once, lecturing to students while she sat in the corner, quiet and absorbing. Fingers, toes, ears, nose. The body sacrifices the edges to protect the core. Then confusion sets in. Disorientation. They remove clothing sometimes. Paradoxical undressing, we call it. The nerves misfire, tell the brain it's burning up when really it's shutting down. She forced the thoughts away. Focused on breathing. On moving. The landscape had lost all definition. White above, white below. White in every direction, broken only by the occasional dark smudge of a pine tree or boulder. She might have been walking in circles, Might have passed the same spot 3 times. No way to tell. Her bag kept slipping. She adjusted it, kept going. Someone's waiting. That was the hook she'd hung everything on. Caleb Rourke. A name in a newspaper advertisement, then words on paper, then months of letters exchanged between strangers who'd somehow found more honesty in ink than most people managed face to face. Seeking correspondence with respectable woman of sound character. Rancher, 34, established property in Montana Territory. Not looking for fairy tales. Looking for partnership. She'd laughed when she first read it. Sitting in her boarding house room in Philadelphia, eating day-old bread because that's what her budget allowed, surrounded by rejection letters from every school and hospital that might have hired a woman with medical training but no formal degree. She'd laughed because it was absurd. Because she didn't know anything about ranching or Montana or partnerships forged through letters. Then she'd written back anyway. Not interested in fairy tales, she'd written. Good. I've never believed in them. But I do believe in honest work, straight talk, and not dying in a city that doesn't want me. If you're serious, write back. He had. For 6 months they'd written. She'd learned about his land, his cattle, the brutal winters and brief summers, the way the territory was growing but still wild enough that independence mattered more than pedigree. He'd learned about her father's death, her mother's remarriage to a man who'd made it clear Alara wasn't welcome, her failed attempts to find work that didn't involve sewing or serving or other things she wouldn't name. She'd learned he'd lost family, a brother years ago, parents more recently, that he'd built something from nothing and was tired of building alone. He'd learned she could set a bone, stitch a wound, deliver a baby if pressed, that she read voraciously, argued stubbornly, and had opinions about cattle breeds despite never having seen one. Neither of them had lied about the hard parts. That mattered. And in his last letter, the one that had arrived in January, forwarded 3 times before finding her, he'd written, "If you're coming, come in February, before spring work starts. We'll figure out the rest." So she'd sold what little she had left, bought a train ticket, then another, then a stagecoach fare, traveled for 3 weeks through winter landscapes that grew progressively more hostile, more foreign, more final. And now she was here, somewhere in these mountains, walking through a blizzard because turning back would mean admitting she'd been wrong about everything. Her legs felt strange, heavy and distant, like they belonged to someone else. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving. How long has it been? No way to know. Could have been an hour, could have been 3. The light was flat, colorless, giving no clue whether it was morning or afternoon or dusk coming on. She tried to remember if she'd eaten. Probably not since dawn, back at the last way station. Her stomach felt hollow, but the hunger was distant, unimportant. Keep moving. Just keep moving. The wind shifted, hit her from a new angle, and she staggered. Her foot caught on something. A rock, a buried branch, and suddenly she was down, face first in snow that filled her mouth and nose and eyes. For a second she just lay there. It would be easy to stay, to let the cold finish what it started. The snow was soft. The exhaustion was absolute. Get up. She didn't know whose voice that was. Hers, maybe. Or her father's. Or just the stubborn part of her brain that hadn't frozen yet. She pushed herself up, spit snow, wiped her face with numb hands that barely responded. Her bag had fallen off. She grabbed it, pulled it back on, stood on legs that trembled. The world tilted. She blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, but everything had gone soft at the edges. Blurry. The white landscape seemed to pulse, breathing in time with her heartbeat. No. Stay sharp. Focus. But focusing took energy she didn't have anymore. She walked, stumbled, walked again, walked. The mechanics of it were breaking down. Lift foot, move forward, plant, shift weight. Steps that should have been automatic now required conscious thought, deliberate effort. Her mind started drifting. She thought about her father's funeral, the rain, how her mother's new husband had stood too close, proprietary and wrong. She thought about the first letter she'd gotten back from Caleb. His handwriting had been surprisingly neat. He'd drawn a small map at the bottom showing where his ranch sat in relation to Silverpine, the mountains, the creek that ran through his property. She thought about nothing at all, just white and cold and the mechanical process of moving. When she fell the second time, getting up took longer. When she fell the third time, she wasn't sure she could. The snow was deep here. She'd gone off whatever remained of the road, that much was certain. The drifts came up to her waist when she tried to stand, and her legs wouldn't cooperate anymore. They'd stopped taking orders. This is bad. The thought came calm, clinical, distant, like diagnosing someone else. Core temperature dropping, motor function compromised, cognitive impairment imminent. She laughed, which came out as more of a cough. Even dying, she sounded like her father's lectures. The wind had gotten worse, or maybe she was just weaker. It pushed her down again, and this time she couldn't fight it. She ended up on her side, curled against the storm, her bag clutched against her chest like it mattered. Someone's waiting, she thought, but even that was fading now, losing its power to move her. The cold was inside her. Not just on her skin, but deeper, in her bones, her blood, the core of her that kept everything running. And it was spreading. She closed her eyes, opened them. Couldn't remember doing either. The light was changing, growing dimmer, or maybe that was just her vision failing. I'm going to die 3 miles from where I was supposed to live, she thought. And even in extremis, the irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been so careful, so deliberate, had planned everything down to the last detail, except for the weather, except for the axle braking, except for her own arrogance in thinking she could walk through a Montana blizzard just because she'd survived a Philadelphia winter. Pride. That's what this was. Pride and stubbornness and the kind of determination that looked like strength until it killed you. Her father would have been disappointed. No, he would have understood completely, which was worse. At least I tried, she thought. At least I made it this far. The wind screamed louder. Or maybe that was something else. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. Couldn't feel much of anything except a strange, creeping warmth that she knew wasn't warmth at all, but the opposite. Her body's last confusion, the nerves misfiring just like her father had described. Paradoxical undressing, she remembered. They take off their clothes, think they're burning. She didn't try to remove anything, didn't have the strength even if the impulse hit. Just lay there, half buried, while the storm did its work. Time stopped meaning anything. She might have drifted, might have dreamed, might have already crossed over into whatever came next. Then, sound. Different from the wind, rhythmic, heavy. She couldn't lift her head, couldn't open her eyes. But she heard it. Hoofbeats. Getting closer. Hallucinating, she thought distantly. Final stage. But the sound didn't stop. It got louder, more real, accompanied now by a voice, deep, male, urgent. Christ, Christ! Hands on her, rolling her over, brushing snow from her face. She tried to open her eyes, but her lashes were frozen shut. Stay with me, the voice said, rough, scared. Don't you dare. Just stay with me. She felt herself being lifted. The world tilted again, but different this time. She was moving but not walking, against something warm, solid, a horse. She was on a horse. Arms around her, holding her upright, a chest against her back, breathing hard. Stupid, the voice muttered, close to her ear now. So damn stupid. What were you thinking? She wanted to answer, wanted to say, I was thinking someone was waiting. I was thinking I'd rather die trying than give up. Wanted to ask if he was real or just her mind's last kindness before everything went dark. But her mouth wouldn't work. Nothing would work. The horse moved fast, fighting through snow, and with each lurch, Alara felt herself slipping further from consciousness. The warmth pressed against her back was the only real thing left. She leaned into it, let it hold her, stopped fighting. Someone came, she thought, and even in the gray fog closing in, that felt important. Someone came looking. Then the gray became black, and she fell into it completely. She woke to pain, which meant she wasn't dead. The pain was everywhere, but especially her hands and feet. Deep, vicious burning that made her gasp and try to pull away, except she couldn't move. Something held her down. No, not down. Still, wrapped tight. Easy. That same voice from before. From the storm. You're all right. You're safe. She forced her eyes open. Took 3 tries. A ceiling. Rough timber, dark with age. A stone fireplace to her right. Flames throwing shadows. Walls made from logs, chinked tight. Small windows showing nothing but white beyond the glass. A cabin. She was in a cabin. She tried to turn her head, succeeded mostly. A man sat beside her, beside whatever she was lying on, a bed or cot, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Dark hair, dark eyes, maybe mid-30s, face weathered and serious. He looked exhausted. "Alara Whitmore?" he asked. She managed a nod, tried to speak, but her throat was raw. "I'm Caleb Rourke." He said it quiet, careful, like the words themselves might break something. "You made it." "The most blossom." She stared at him, at the man she'd crossed a continent for, written months of letters to, promised to meet and marry despite never having seen his face. He looked older than she'd imagined, harder, real in a way that ink on paper had never managed. "Barely," she rasped. Her voice came out wrecked. "Barely made it. That storm killed 2 men last week," Caleb said. "Experienced men. Miners who knew these mountains." His jaw tightened. "What the hell were you doing walking through it? Stagecoach broke? So you stayed with it? Waited?" "No." She coughed, pain lancing through her chest. "Walked. 3 miles, in a blizzard, alone." "Yes. Why?" The question hung there. She saw the anger in it, but also something else. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief that anyone could be that reckless. She met his eyes. "You said February. Said come in February, so I came." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, short, sharp, without any humor in it. "You almost died keeping a schedule? I almost died keeping a promise." That shut him up. He looked away, jaw working. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone rough. If I'd known about the storm, about the coach, I would have told you to wait. To hole up somewhere safe until it passed. I didn't wait." Clearly. Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. Just heavy with everything unsaid, everything still unknown. Alara tried to move, winced as the burning in her extremities intensified. "How bad? Your hands and feet?" Caleb glanced at them, wrapped thick in cloth. "Could have been worse. Another hour out there and you'd have lost fingers, toes, maybe more. As it is," he paused, "they'll heal. Hurt like hell for a while, but they'll heal." "How'd you find me?" "Felt wrong." He said it simple, like it explained everything. "Woke up this morning and felt wrong. Checked the road, saw the stagecoach. Driver said someone walked off. A woman. Eastern, heading to Silverpine." His eyes came back to hers. "Didn't take much to figure out who. You rode out in that storm looking for me." "Yes. That was stupid," says the woman who walked into it. But there was no bite in it, just tired observation. She tried to smile, felt her cracked lips split, tasted blood. "We're a pair then." "Apparently." More silence. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows, but the sound was muted here, distant, no longer immediate threat. "Your letters," Alara said eventually. "You never mentioned being suicidal." "I'm not." Could have fooled me. Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Calculated risk. I know this land, knew where you'd likely go off course, and I have a good horse." "Still stupid." "Maybe." He leaned back, scrubbed a hand across his face. "But so's writing to a stranger for 6 months, then crossing a continent to marry him. So I figure we're even." "Fair point." Alara closed her eyes just for a second, but exhaustion pulled at her. The kind of tired that lived in your bones that couldn't be fixed with one night's sleep. "Rest," Caleb said. "We'll figure everything else out later." "Everything else? The wedding, the town, your hands healing enough to—" He stopped. Started over. "Just rest. One thing at a time." She wanted to argue, wanted to ask what he'd almost said, what concerns he'd swallowed. But her body had other priorities and they were louder than her curiosity. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but they were what she had. For coming, for looking. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. Couldn't not. You wrote all those letters, made all those promises. Seemed only fair someone kept theirs. It wasn't poetry, wasn't even particularly romantic, but it was honest, and honest was what they'd built this whole unlikely thing on. She let herself drift after that. Let the pain and exhaustion win. But before sleep took her completely, she heard him move closer, felt him adjust the blankets around her, staying near like he was still afraid she might slip away. Someone came, she thought again. Someone actually came. In a life that had been defined mostly by people leaving or failing to show up at all, that felt like enough to start with. The rest they'd figure out, or they'd fail trying. Either way, at least they'd do it together. She woke again to gray light and the sound of someone moving around the cabin. Her body felt like it had been beaten with boards, stiff, aching in places she didn't know could ache, but the burning in her hands and feet had dulled to a persistent throb, which she took as progress. Caleb stood at the stove, his back to her, doing something that involved a pot and what smelled like coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute she'd been choking down for months. The scent alone was enough to make her stomach wake up and start demanding attention. "You're up," he said without turning around, like he'd sensed it somehow. Barely. Her voice still sounded like she'd swallowed gravel. "How long was I out?" 2 days, mostly. You'd surface now and then, but never really conscious." He poured liquid into a tin cup, brought it over. "Can you sit?" She tried, failed, tried again with his hand under her shoulder and managed to prop herself against the wall the cot was pushed up to. Every muscle screamed complaint, but she kept her face neutral, mostly. "Here." He handed her the cup. "Careful, it's hot." Her hands were still wrapped, but she could grip well enough. The first sip burned her throat in the best possible way. The second was better. By the third, she felt almost human. "There's broth too," Caleb said. "When you're ready, need to get something solid in you. In a minute." She looked around the cabin properly now. Single room, maybe 20 by 20. The bed she was on, a table with 2 chairs, the stove, shelves lined with supplies and tools. Everything clean and organized, but worn, used, functional. A working space, not a home exactly. More like a place where someone survived between harder work elsewhere. One window faced east, another north. Both showed nothing but white. The storm had passed, but the snow remained, deep enough that the world outside looked foreign, erased. "Still snowing?" she asked. "Stopped yesterday afternoon, but we got near 2 feet. Roads won't be passable for days. So we're stuck. For now." He pulled a chair over, sat, leaned back against the wall. "Which is a problem." Something in his tone made her look at him sharper. "What kind of problem?" He was quiet for a moment, studying his hands. They were working hands, scarred, calloused, permanently stained in the creases. Rancher's hands, the kind that didn't know softness. "You showing up here alone, staying in my cabin for days?" he said finally. "That's the kind of thing people talk about." Understanding came slow but complete. The town. The town, the neighbors, everyone within 20 miles who has nothing better to do than speculate. He met her eyes. "Montana Territory isn't Philadelphia. Rules are different here, but some things matter more. Reputation. A woman's reputation especially. Because I nearly died and you saved me. Because you're unmarried and spending nights under my roof. Doesn't matter why, just matters that you are." She should have been angry, should have felt insulted that survival could be twisted into scandal. But she was too tired for anger, and besides, he wasn't wrong. She'd read enough, heard enough stories from travelers heading west. The frontier had its own codes, its own judgments. "So what do we do?" she asked. "That depends." He shifted in the chair. "On what you want. I know we talked about marriage in the letters, but that was before you nearly froze to death. Before you saw this place, saw me. If you want to go back, once the road's clear, I'll get you to the station. No judgment, no hard feelings. You'd let me leave. I'd help you leave if that's what you choose. You don't owe me anything, Alara. You made it here. That's enough. More than enough. She stared at him, at this man who'd ridden into a killing storm looking for a woman he'd never met, pulled her back from death, kept her alive for 2 days, and was now offering her an out. No pressure, no demands, just choice. And if I stay? She asked. His jaw tightened. If you stay, we get married. Soon. Before the road's clear, before anyone can come out here and start counting nights. We do it here, in this cabin, with whoever I can get to witness. Won't be fancy. Won't be what you probably imagined. I stopped imagining fancy things a long time ago. Still, it's fast. Some would say too fast. We've been corresponding for 6 months. That's longer than some courtships. On paper, not in person. True. She took another sip of coffee, using the time to think. Her hands shook slightly, and she didn't know if that was from the cold damage or nerves. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why didn't you mention you'd be risking your reputation too? All that talk about mine, but you're unmarried, taking in a strange woman. People will talk about you just as much. I'm a man. It's different. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's true. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can weather talk. I've weathered worse. But you're new here. You'll need allies, friends, some kind of standing in whatever community exists. Starting out as the woman who lived alone with a man for days before marrying him, that makes everything harder. So you're trying to protect me. I'm trying to give you options. There's a difference. She wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle. He was being practical, not patronizing. Stating facts, not making decisions for her. What do you want? She asked. Not what's proper or smart. What do you actually want? He looked at her for a long moment. The firelight caught the side of his face, showed the weathering there, the lines around his eyes from squinting into sun and wind. He looked older than 34, looked like he'd lived hard and expected to keep doing it. I want you to stay, he said quietly. I want what we talked about in those letters, partnership, someone to build something with. This place, he gestured at the cabin, the space beyond. It works, but it's lonely, and I'm tired of lonely. Honest, blunt, no poetry or pretense. She respected that more than any flowery speech could have managed. All right, she said. All right, what? All right, I'll stay. We'll marry. Soon as you can arrange it. His expression didn't change much, but something in his posture eased. Relief, maybe, or just the tension of waiting for an answer releasing. You're sure? You can take time to... I'm sure. She set the empty cup aside. I didn't come all this way to turn back because things got complicated. And I meant what I said in my letters. I'm looking for honest work, straight partnership. You're offering that. So yes, I'm sure. He nodded slowly. Okay then. I'll ride into town tomorrow, talk to whoever passes for a minister these days. Get witnesses lined up, probably be back by evening. Tomorrow? Roads are that clear? They're not. But my horse is good, and I know the trails. He stood, moved toward the stove. For now, you need to eat. Build your strength back. He was right, but she hated the weakness, hated being the one lying in bed while he did the work. It went against every instinct she'd developed over the years of surviving alone. Caleb? Yeah. After we're married, I pull my weight. Whatever needs doing here, I learn it. I'm not decoration, and I'm not dead weight. The corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. Didn't think you were. Woman who walks 3 miles through a blizzard isn't looking to sit idle. Just making sure we're clear. We're clear. He brought her broth, thick with vegetables and what tasted like venison, rich enough that 3 swallows filled her completely. She ate it all anyway, forcing past the fullness, knowing her body needed it. Caleb ate standing up, watching the window. She studied him when he wasn't looking. Tall, probably 6 foot or close to it. Lean but solid, built by work, not leisure. His clothes were worn but well maintained. His boots had been resoled at least once. Everything about him spoke of someone who made things last because replacing them wasn't easy. You live here alone? She asked. No hired help? Can't afford help. I do what needs doing, hire day labor sometimes during branding or harvest, but mostly it's just me. How much land? 400 acres, give or take, about 100 head of cattle, some horses, enough to make a living if you work it right and the weather cooperates. Does it cooperate? Sometimes. He glanced at her. Last winter killed about 20 head. Year before that was good. It's variable. So we could lose everything. We could, or we could build it into something bigger. That's the gamble. She absorbed that. The precariousness of it. The complete lack of safety net. Back east, even poor, there'd been structures, charity organizations, churches, neighbors who'd known your family for generations. Here there was just land and weather and whatever determination you brought to the fight. You scared? He asked. Terrified. Good. Means you understand what you're getting into. Are you? Scared? He thought about it. Of failing? Yeah. Of being alone through another winter like last year? More than I want to admit. His eyes met hers. Of you realizing you made a mistake and leaving? That too. The honesty startled her. Most men she'd known, including her father, hid vulnerability behind walls of competence. Caleb just put it out there, unvarnished. I don't quit easy, she said. Neither do I. So maybe we'll be all right. Maybe. That word was carrying a lot of weight. She slept again after eating, her body demanding it despite her mind's protests. When she woke, the light had changed. Later afternoon, the sun somewhere behind clouds that hadn't lifted. Caleb sat at the table writing something, his handwriting as neat as it had been in his letters. What's that? She asked. Letter to the territorial office, reporting your arrival, requesting marriage license. He didn't look up. Probably won't get processed for months, but it's proper procedure. You care about proper procedure? I care about things being legal. Territory becomes a state eventually. All this gets examined. Better to have papers in order. Practical. She was learning that about him. He thought ahead, planned for contingencies, didn't leave things to chance. Can I get up? She asked. Walk around? You can try. Take it slow. She swung her legs off the bed, planted her feet on the floor. The wrapped bandages made them clumsy, but they held her weight. She stood, gripping the bed frame for balance, and took a step. Pain shot up both legs, but it was the sharp pain of healing, not the deep burn of damage. She could work with that. 3 steps to the table. Steps to Tarbemasut. 4 back. By the 6th circuit, her legs were shaking, but she was standing, moving, reclaiming function. Stubborn, Caleb observed. You say that like it's new information. Just confirming what the letters suggested. She made 2 more laps before her body insisted she sit. Caleb pulled out the second chair, and she collapsed into it, breathing harder than 6 steps should have required. You'll be sore for days, he said. Body's been through trauma. Takes time. I know. I've seen enough injuries to... She stopped. She hadn't told him about the medical training, not directly, just vague mentions of her father's work. To what? He prompted. To know how healing works. My father was a doctor. I helped him sometimes. Learned things. How much did you learn? Enough to be useful. Not enough that any hospital would hire me. Women don't get to be doctors, not officially, but I can set bones, stitch wounds, handle basic treatment. He sat back, studying her. That's more than you mentioned in your letters. I didn't want to seem like I was exaggerating my skills, or expecting you to care. That's useful knowledge out here, real useful. Nearest doctor is in Silverpine, and he's drunk more often than sober. Then I guess I picked the right place. Guess you did. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable this time, or close to it. The fire crackled. Wind pressed against the windows, but the cabin held firm. Tell me about the town, Alara said eventually. Silverpine. What's it like? Caleb made a face. Small. Maybe 300 people on a good day. Started as a mining camp, transitioned to supply hub when most of the easy silver played out. There's a main street, general store, saloon, boarding house, blacksmith, assay office. Church on the edge that gets used for meetings more than services. That's about it. And the people? Mixed. Some are decent, some aren't. Most are just trying to survive, same as everyone else. He paused. There's a woman, Martha Kincaid, runs the general store. She's sharp, fair, doesn't suffer fools. If you need an ally, start with her. Anyone else I should know about? Thomas Brennan. He's got the biggest spread near here, about 3 times my land. Older guy, established, has weight in the community. He's been... Caleb trailed off, choosing words carefully. He's been after my land for a while, made offers. I've refused. Why does he want it? Water rights. My property controls access to the best creek in the area. He's got land, but in summer his water runs thin. Mine doesn't. Understanding clicked. So he has motivation to see you fail. He does, but he's not overtly hostile, just persistent. And he's got the kind of money that makes persistence dangerous. What's he offered? Last time, $5,000, which is generous for 400 acres in territory this rough. But you refused. This land is mine. I built it from nothing. I'm not selling just because someone with deeper pockets wants it for convenience. There was heat in his voice now, not anger exactly, but fierce ownership, pride, the kind of attachment that went beyond economics. I understand, Alara said. And she did. She'd left everything behind rather than accept charity or compromise. She recognized stubbornness when she saw it. Brennan will come around eventually, Caleb continued. Once word spreads that I'm married, that there's 2 of us working the land now, he'll want to assess the situation. Might back off, might push harder. What do you think he'll do? Honestly, I don't know. He's hard to read, but I wanted you aware before you meet him. Appreciated. More silence. She watched him work on the letter, the careful formation of each word. His fingers were stiff from cold and hard work, but they moved with surprising precision. Can I ask you something? She said. You've been asking things all afternoon. One more. The brother you mentioned in your letters, the one you lost. What happened? His hand stopped moving. He stared at the paper for a long moment before setting the pen down. His name was Daniel, younger by 4 years. We worked this land together when our parents first claimed it. He was better with people than me, better at negotiating, making connections. I handled the physical work. He handled the business end. Caleb's voice had gone flat, reciting facts. 5 years ago, he rode to Silverpine to settle accounts at the store. Horse threw him on the way back, broke his neck. I found him the next morning. I'm sorry. It was quick, at least. Probably didn't suffer. He picked up the pen again, but didn't write. After that, our parents kind of gave up. Mother first, she just faded. Father lasted another year before his heart quit. So now it's just me. And all the work that used to be split between 3 people. Yeah. No wonder he looked older than his years. No wonder he'd put that advertisement in the paper looking for partnership. He'd been doing triple duty for half a decade. I can't replace them, Alara said carefully. Your brother or your parents, but I can help carry the load. That's worth something. It's worth a lot. He met her eyes. More than you know. They understood each other then. 2 people who'd lost family, lost support structures, ended up alone in different ways and arrived at the same conclusion. Alone was survivable, but together might actually be living. The light outside dimmed toward evening. Caleb lit lamps, checked the fire, started preparing dinner. Alara stayed at the table, watching him work, learning the routines of the space, where things were kept, how he moved through the room, the efficiency born of doing everything yourself for years. Tomorrow, he said while slicing potatoes, when I go to town, you stay here. Keep the fire going, eat regularly, rest. Don't try to do too much. I'll be fine alone. I know you will, but doors stay locked anyway, just in case. In case of what? Probably nothing, but winter makes people desperate sometimes. Better safe. She didn't argue. He knew this place, these risks. She was still learning. They ate together as full dark came on. Venison, potatoes, beans from a jar he'd put up last summer. Simple food, but there was plenty of it, and it was well prepared. Another mark in his favor. A man who could cook meant a man who took care of himself, didn't expect women to serve him. After dinner, she insisted on helping clean up despite her wrapped hands. It was awkward but manageable. Caleb didn't protest, just moved around her, accommodating her slower pace. "You'll sleep in the bed again tonight," he said. "I'll take the floor." "That's not necessary. It's necessary until we're married. Appearances matter, even if no one's here to see. Caleb, you've been sleeping on the floor for 2 days. You'll wreck your back." "My back is fine. The bed's yours." He said it with finality that closed the argument. She let it go, too tired to push, and aware that his reasoning, however frustrating, came from a place of trying to protect them both from speculation. She settled into the bed while he banked the fire, arranged blankets on the floor near the stove where the warmth would last longest. The cabin fell into darkness except for the glow of coals. "Caleb?" she said into the quiet. "Yeah?" "Thank you for all of this, for caring about the details. Just doing what's right. Still, thank you." He didn't answer, but she heard him shift, getting comfortable, or as comfortable as the floor would allow. She lay awake for a long time after, staring at the ceiling she couldn't see, listening to wind and fire and the occasional creak of settling timber. Tomorrow he'd ride to town. Tomorrow they'd start the machinery of making this official, binding their lives together through law and witness. She should have been terrified, should have been second-guessing everything. Instead, she felt calm, certain, like she'd finally stopped running from disaster and started building toward something else. Morning came cold and clear. Caleb was up before dawn, moving quiet through the cabin, building up the fire, making coffee. By the time Alara woke properly, he was already dressed for travel, heavy coat, gloves, hat pulled low. "There's food on the stove," he said. "More wood by the door if you need it. I'll be back before dark." "Be careful." "Always am." He paused at the door. "Alara? Whatever happens today, whatever I hear in town, we stick to the plan. Understood?" "Understood." He nodded and was gone, taking the cold draft with him when the door closed. She spent the day doing small tasks, unwrapped her hands carefully. The skin beneath was raw but healing, no sign of the deep damage she'd feared. Her feet were better too, sore, tender, but functional. She rewrapped them with clean cloth, moving slow, relearning the feeling in her fingers. She organized supplies on the shelves, memorizing what was where. Dried goods, canned items, medical supplies that were basic but present. She made an inventory in her head, noted what they'd need come spring. She examined the cabin itself, found it solid, well-built, maintained with care. The windows were tight, the roof didn't leak, the stove worked efficiently. Caleb had built something good here, something worth keeping. Afternoon crept toward evening. She kept checking the window, watching for movement. Told herself not to worry. He knew the land, the trails, the risks. But worry came anyway, uninvited and persistent. Full dark fell. She added wood to the fire, heated food she didn't eat, paced the small space until pacing felt pointless. Then hoofbeats outside. The door opened and Caleb came through stamping snow, looking exhausted but intact. "It's done," he said without preamble. Minister agreed. 2 witnesses lined up. "They'll come out day after tomorrow if the weather holds." "That fast?" I explained the situation. He understood. Caleb pulled off his coat, hung it by the door. "There's talk already about me riding out in the storm, about you being here. He wants it handled quickly as much as we do." "What kind of talk?" "The usual. Some think I'm a fool for risking my neck. Some think you're trouble for causing it. Most don't know what to think yet." He moved to the stove, poured coffee. "Martha Kincaid says she'll bring a dress. Something appropriate. She seems curious about you." "Curious how?" "Interested, not hostile. She said any woman who'd walk through that storm is either crazy or determined, and she respects determined." "I'll take that." He sat finally, and she saw how tired he actually was. The ride had taken everything, but he'd done it, made the arrangements, faced whatever judgment the town had ready, came back with a plan. "Day after tomorrow," she repeated. "We're really doing this." "We are, unless you've changed your mind." "I haven't." "Then we're getting married in 2 days." It should have felt rushed, should have felt wrong somehow. But sitting in the warm cabin, watching this man who'd proven himself reliable in ways that mattered, Alara felt only certainty. "What happens after?" she asked. "After the ceremony?" "We work. Spring's coming. Lot to do before then. We'll need to assess the herd, repair fence, prepare for calving. You'll learn as we go." "And the town, Brennan? We deal with them as they come, together." He looked at her directly. "That's the point of this, right? Not being alone?" "Right. Then we face whatever comes. Same as we've faced everything else so far. Simple, direct, no false promises about easy paths or guaranteed success. Just commitment to standing together against whatever the land and its people threw at them." She could work with that. They ate dinner, cleaned up, settled into the evening routine that was becoming familiar. Caleb gave her the bed again without argument and took his place on the floor. The fire burned low. Outside, the world stayed frozen and white. "2 more nights," Alara said into the darkness. "Then this gets real." "It's already real," Caleb answered. "The ceremony just makes it official." He was right. They'd already committed the moment she'd said yes, the moment he'd ridden into that storm. Everything else was just paperwork. She closed her eyes and let herself believe it, that this could work, that 2 stubborn people with nothing to lose and everything to prove could carve out something worth having from 400 acres of difficult land. The alternative was going back to nothing, and she'd come too far for that. The day before the wedding, Martha Kincaid arrived on horseback leading a pack mule, both animals fighting through snow that still came up past their knees in places. Alara heard them before she saw them, the labored breathing, the crunch and snap of breaking crust, and moved to the window. The woman who dismounted was maybe 50, built solid, dressed in practical layers that spoke of someone who didn't waste time on appearance. She had a face that looked like it had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. Caleb went out to meet her. Alara watched them talk, saw Martha gesture emphatically about something, saw Caleb nod and point back at the cabin. Then they were both coming toward the door. "Alara Whitmore," Martha said the moment she stepped inside, not bothering with preamble. "I brought the dress. Let's see if it fits." No introduction, no pleasantries, just straight to business. "Thank you for coming all this way, Alara said. "Wasn't charity. I wanted to meet the woman who caused such a stir." Martha's eyes were sharp, assessing. "You look better than I expected. Caleb said you were half dead when he found you." "I was. But you walked anyway, through that storm." "I did," Martha grunted. Approval or judgment, hard to tell. She pulled a bundle from her pack, shook it out. A dress, dark blue, simple cut, no ornamentation. Practical, like everything else about this woman. "It was mine when I was younger," Martha said, "before I thickened up. Should fit someone your size. You can keep it or return it, doesn't matter to me." "I'll return it," Alara said. "After. With thanks." "Fair enough. Go try it on. Behind that curtain there if you're modest." Caleb had already retreated outside, giving them space. Alara took the dress and moved behind the canvas partition that divided the sleeping area. Her hands still fumbled with buttons, but she managed. The dress fit. Not perfectly. A bit loose in the waist, slightly short in the hem, but close enough. She emerged and Martha circled her once, tugging here, adjusting there. "It'll do?" Martha pronounced. "You clean up decent. That'll help." "Help with what?" "With the town accepting you. They're already talking, deciding what they think. First impression matters." Martha's eyes met hers. "You understand what you're walking into. This isn't Philadelphia. People here have long memories and not much entertainment. Your business becomes everyone's business real fast." Caleb explained some of it. Did he explain that half the women in Silver Pine have been eyeing him for years? That you're marrying one of the few unattached men under 40 who owns land? That's going to create resentment. Alara hadn't considered that. In her mind, Caleb had been hers since the letters started. But of course, the women here didn't know about letters. They just saw an outsider claiming a prize they'd been circling. "I can handle resentment," she said. "Can you? Because it won't be loud, it'll be quiet. Invitations that don't come. Help that isn't offered. Small cuts that add up." Martha crossed her arms. "I'm not saying this to scare you off." I'm saying it so you know what field you're playing on. Why are you helping me then, if I'm going to be resented? Martha smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Because I like people who take risks, and because Caleb's good people, works hard, pays his debts, doesn't cause trouble. He deserves someone equally solid. You walked 3 miles through a blizzard to keep a promise. That's solid enough for me. Until I prove otherwise. Until you prove otherwise, Martha agreed. Everyone gets one chance out here. Use it well. She stayed another hour, giving Alara a rapid education in the social landscape of Silver Pine. Who mattered, who didn't, who held grudges, who could be trusted. It was like learning a new language. All the subtle hierarchies and unspoken rules that governed frontier society. Thomas Brennan, Martha said at one point. He'll come sniffing around. Be polite, but not friendly. Don't give him any openings. Caleb mentioned he wants the land. Wants it bad. Has ever since Daniel died and Caleb was left alone. Thought he could wait him out, watch him fail. Your arrival changes that calculation. So he'll be hostile? Won't show it openly, too smart for that, but he'll be watching, looking for weakness. Martha's expression hardened. His son, James, is a different story, younger, angrier, less controlled. If there's trouble, it'll likely come from him. What kind of trouble? The kind where boundaries get tested, stock goes missing, fences get damaged, things that are hard to prove but easy to suspect. She paused. Just be aware. And don't let Caleb handle everything alone. That's what partnership means. After Martha left, Alara told Caleb everything she'd learned. He listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. She's not wrong, he said finally, about any of it. James Brennan especially. He's been itching for confrontation since his father told him no on buying this place. Thinks I'm standing in the way of his inheritance. Are you? I'm standing on my own land. If that's in his way, that's his problem. They spent the rest of the day preparing the cabin for tomorrow. It wasn't much, cleaning, organizing, making space for the ceremony. But the activity helped settle Alara's nerves, gave her something to focus on besides the weight of what was about to happen. That night, lying in the dark, she spoke into the silence. Are you scared? Of what? Caleb's voice came from the floor, quiet but clear. Tomorrow, this, us. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yeah, I'm scared. Scared of failing you. Scared this won't work out the way we hope. Scared I'm not enough to... He stopped, started over. I've been alone a long time. Sometimes I forget how to be anything else. I don't need you to be anything else. I just need you to be honest. I can do honest, then we'll figure out the rest. The next morning broke clear and cold. Caleb was up early, nervous energy driving him through chores with unusual speed. Alara dressed carefully in the borrowed dress, braided her hair, tried not to think about how different this was from any wedding she'd imagined as a girl. No family, no flowers, no music, just a cabin in the middle of frozen nowhere, and a handful of strangers bearing witness to something built on letters and desperation. But it was real. That counted for more than ceremony. The minister arrived first, a thin man named Reverend Hackett, who looked more like a clerk than a spiritual leader. He had kind eyes, though, and a gentle manner that suggested he'd seen enough hardship to have lost his judgment. Miss Whitmore, he said, taking her hand carefully. I'm glad you survived your journey. That storm was brutal. Thank you for coming out here. It's important work, binding lives together. He glanced at Caleb. You two ready for this? We are, Caleb said, and Alara nodded agreement. The witnesses came next. Martha Kincaid and a man named Peter Donnelly, who ran the boarding house in Silver Pine. He was older, weathered, with a face that suggested he'd been handsome once before the frontier got hold of it. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Rourke, he said, then corrected himself. Or Miss Whitmore still, I suppose? For a few more minutes, anyway. Alara is fine. Alara, then. He had an easy manner, comfortable in his skin. Martha tells me you're tougher than you look. I'd better be. You will be. This land makes everyone tougher, or it breaks them. No in between. They gathered near the fireplace. No formal arrangement, just 5 people standing in a rough semicircle while Reverend Hackett opened a worn book and began reading words that had bound countless couples before them. Ilara barely heard the opening. Her attention kept catching on details: the way morning light came through the eastern window, the smell of coffee still lingering from breakfast, Caleb standing beside her looking uncomfortable in clean clothes and obvious nerves. "Do you, Caleb Rourke, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, no hesitation. She felt something shift in her chest, some knot of tension loosening. "Do you, Ilara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" This was it. The moment everything changed or didn't. The point where she committed fully to this gamble, this partnership, this life she'd chosen by walking into a storm. "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me by the Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife." Hackett closed the book. "You may kiss if you'd like, though it's not required." Caleb looked at her. She looked back. They'd touched before, when he'd saved her, when he'd tended her injuries. But this was different. This was choice. He leaned in, pressed his lips to hers briefly. Chaste, almost formal, but real. When he pulled back, his ears were slightly red. "Congratulations," Martha said, practical as ever. "Now sign the papers so it's legal." They signed. Hackett witnessed. Martha and Peter added their names. Just like that, it was done. Ilara Whitmore became Ilara Rourke, and 2 separate lives became one combined attempt at survival. Martha had brought food, bread, cheese, dried fruit, even a small bottle of whiskey that Peter insisted they share. "To the happy couples," he said, raising his tin cup. "May they survive their first year together." "Survival seems like low expectations," Ilara said. "Out here it's the highest compliment," Martha countered. "Most couples don't make it 12 months before one of them breaks." "We won't break," Caleb said quietly. "No," Ilara agreed. "We won't." They ate standing up, the gathering too small and informal for any real celebration. Conversation was sparse, practical, talk of weather, roads, spring plans. No one mentioned the speed of the wedding or the circumstances that necessitated it. They were all frontier people. They understood necessity. After an hour, Hackett made his excuses, other duties, long ride back. Peter followed soon after. Martha lingered, helping clean up, giving Ilara knowing looks that suggested she understood exactly what kind of night lay ahead. "Advice?" Martha said as she prepared to leave. "Be patient with each other. Marriage is work, even when it starts from friendship. You two are starting from less than that. Give it time." "We will," Ilara said. "And don't let the town define you. You define yourself. Make them respect you on your terms." "How do I do that?" "By not failing. By standing beside your husband and pulling your weight. By proving you're not decoration or desperation, but an actual partner." Martha pulled on her gloves. "They'll test you. Pass the tests." Then she was gone, and Ilara and Caleb were alone in the cabin that was now officially theirs. Together. The silence felt heavy. "Well," Caleb said finally, "that's done." "It is." "You all right?" "I think so. You?" "Yeah, just strange, having it be official. We've been living together for days." "That was necessity. This is choice." He moved to the stove, checking the fire more out of habit than need. Changes things. She understood what he wasn't saying. Tonight was different. They were married now. Certain expectations came with that. Certain intimacies that had been theoretical in letters and impossible while she was injured. "Caleb," she waited until he looked at her. "I'm not ready for everything yet. My body's still healing. I just need time," he finished. "I know. I wasn't expecting, I don't expect." He stopped, frustrated. "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Talking about this, any of this." He gestured vaguely between them. "Daniel was the one who was good with people. I just work. That's what I know. Then we'll figure it out by working, together." She crossed to him, took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm. We don't have to rush anything. We just have to be honest. I can do honest. I know. That's why I'm here. They spent the rest of the day doing normal things. Caleb went out to check on the livestock, 3 horses, a milk cow, a handful of chickens that had somehow survived the winter. Alara stayed inside, continuing her inventory of supplies, making lists of what they'd need. It felt domestic, real, like they were actually building something instead of just surviving. Evening came. They ate dinner, cleaned up, settled into the routine that had become familiar. But tonight was different. Tonight the bed wasn't just Alara's, and the floor wasn't just Caleb's temporary accommodation. "Take the bed," he said. No. She cut him off. "We're married. We share the bed. Even if we're just sleeping, we share it. That's what partners do." He looked uncertain. "Alara, I don't want you to feel... I don't feel pressured. I feel married. There's a difference." She climbed into bed, moved to one side. "Come on, you've been sleeping on the floor for days. Your back must be killing you." He hesitated another moment, then gave in. Kept his clothes on, stayed on top of the blankets while she was under them. Put as much space between them as the narrow bed allowed. They lay there in the dark, both rigid, both hyper-aware of the other's presence. "This is awkward," Alara said finally. "Yeah. It'll get better." "Will it?" "Has to. We can't spend the rest of our lives this tense." He laughed quietly. "Fair point." The tension didn't disappear, but it eased, became manageable. She felt him relax slightly, heard his breathing even out. "Thank you," she said, "for not pushing, for being patient." "Nothing to thank me for. You set the pace, I follow it." "Is that how this works?" "That's how partnerships work. Give and take, respect." He shifted slightly, still careful not to crowd her. "My parents were like that. They worked together, decided together. My father didn't rule and my mother didn't submit. They were equals." "That's what I want." "Then that's what we build." She believed him. Not because he said it pretty, but because he'd already proven it, and how he'd offered her a choice about staying, and how he'd protected her reputation, and how he'd listened when she said she needed time. Actions mattered more than words, and his actions had been solid from the start. She drifted towards sleep, aware of his warmth beside her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the strange comfort of not being alone. The next morning, she woke to find him already up, building the fire, making coffee. Normal routine. Except now there was a ring on her finger, simple iron band Caleb had produced during the ceremony, and her name had changed. Mrs. Rourke, Alara Rourke. It sounded foreign. She'd get used to it. "Sleep all right?" Caleb asked without turning around. "Better than I expected." "Good, because we've got work ahead." He poured 2 cups of coffee, brought one to her. "Storm cost us time. There's fence to check, livestock to assess, supplies to inventory properly, and we need to start planning for spring." "What happens in spring?" "Calving season. That's when we find out how many head survived winter, how many new calves we've got. Numbers dictate everything, what we sell, what we keep, whether we can expand." "When does it start?" "March, usually. So we've got maybe a month to prepare." He sat across from her. "I'm going to teach you to ride properly, to handle cattle, to shoot if necessary. Everything you need to be useful. I can learn." "I know you can. Question is how fast." His expression was serious. "Because spring's also when Brennan will make his move. If he's going to push, it'll be then, when we're spread thin and vulnerable." "What kind of move?" "Could be anything, could be nothing, but I want you prepared either way." They spent the morning working together. He showed her how to care for the horses, feeding, grooming, checking hooves for stones or splits. The animals were wary of her at first, but she moved slow, spoke quiet, let them get used to her presence. "That's Smoke," Caleb said, indicating a gray gelding. "He's steady, good for learning. This is Star. She's smarter, but temperamental. And that's Baron. He's mine. Don't ride him unless I say so." Baron was dark, almost black, with white on his face and one leg. He looked like trouble and carried himself like he knew it. "He doesn't like strangers," Caleb continued. "Took me a year to earn his trust. He's why I found you that day. Wouldn't have made it through that storm on anything else. Alara studied the horse. Thank you, Baron, for carrying your stubborn owner into a blizzard. The horse's ears flicked, but he didn't move. After the barn, they checked the chickens, collected 3 eggs despite the cold, inspected the cow who seemed unimpressed by the new human. Her name's Bessie because I'm not creative, Caleb said. She produces about a gallon a day, more in summer. You know how to milk? No. I'll teach you tomorrow. Today we need to walk the property line, check for damage. They bundled up and headed out. The snow was still deep, but the sun was bright, the temperature almost tolerable. Alara followed Caleb's footsteps, learning the terrain, noting landmarks, a distinctive boulder, a lightning-struck tree, a creek bed currently frozen solid. This is all yours? She asked, gesturing at the expanse. Ours, he corrected. 400 acres, give or take. Runs from that ridge there to the creek about a mile south. East to west is bounded by natural barriers, rocks mostly. It's bigger than I imagined. It's not much compared to Brennan's spread, but it's good land. The creek runs year-round, grass comes in strong. Cattle thrive here when they're managed right. They walked for hours, Caleb pointing out property markers, explaining water rights, showing her where the best grazing was. Her feet ached and her legs were tired, but she kept pace, refusing to slow him down. They were heading back when they saw riders coming from the east. 3 of them, taking their time, picking their way through the snow. Caleb stopped. His whole demeanor changed. Not scared exactly, but wary. Alert. That's Brennan, he said quietly. And his son James. Don't know the third one. What do we do? We meet them. Be polite but not warm. And let me lead. They waited while the riders approached. As they got closer, Alara could make out details. The older man, Brennan, sat his horse like someone who'd been born to it, confident and relaxed. He was maybe 60, gray-haired, well-dressed for the territory. Everything about him spoke of money and establishment. The son was younger, maybe late 20s, with his father's build but none of his ease. He looked angry, just sitting there, like the world had disappointed him, and he blamed everyone for it. The third rider was rougher, a hired hand probably, there for muscle more than conversation. Rourke, Brennan called as they came within speaking distance. Heard you got married, thought we'd come offer congratulations. That's kind of you, Caleb said, voice neutral. Brennan's eyes found Alara. This the bride? The one who walked through the storm? My wife, Alara. Alara, this is Thomas Brennan. Runs the big spread east of here. Ma'am? Brennan tipped his hat. That was quite an entrance you made. Town's still talking about it. I imagine they are. Alara kept her voice steady. Brave or foolish, depending on who you ask. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. I know exactly what I've gotten into. Do you? Because marriage is hard enough without adding Montana winters and stubborn men to the mix. His attention shifted back to Caleb. Speaking of stubborn, you given any more thought to my offer? No need. Answer's still the same. That's unfortunate. I'm prepared to go higher. 6,000. That's generous for land this rough. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not this. James Brennan had been quiet until now, just staring at them with undisguised hostility. You're making a mistake, he said, voice tight. Winter's only going to get harder. 2 people can't manage this spread properly. You'll lose stock, lose money, lose everything eventually. Maybe, Caleb said, but it'll be my everything to lose. Stubborn fool. James, Brennan said sharply. Mind your manners. He looked back at Caleb. My son's not wrong, though. Spring's coming. That's when we'll see who survives and who doesn't. I hope you're prepared. We are. Good, because if you change your mind, when you change your mind, my offer stands. But it won't stand forever. Brennan gathered his reins. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope it works out better than you expect. They rode off, taking their time, making it clear they weren't intimidated or impressed. Alara watched them go. That was a threat. That was a warning. There's a difference. Is there? With Brennan, yeah. He plays long games. He'll wait, Watch for us to fail, then swoop in when we're desperate. Caleb started walking again. James is the problem. He wants immediate results. No patience. Martha warned me about him. She was right to. Just stay aware. Stay cautious. He glanced at her. And if anything happens when I'm not around, you run. Don't fight, don't argue. Just run and get somewhere safe. I'm not. Promise me, Alara. I can't do what needs doing if I'm worried about you being stubborn in the wrong moment. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she could handle herself, but she saw the fear under his insistence and understood. He'd already lost too much. He couldn't afford to lose her too. I promise, she said. If there's real danger, I run. Thank you. They made it back to the cabin as the sun started its descent. Alara's whole body ached from the walking, the cold, the tension of the encounter, but she felt stronger than she had since the storm, like she was reclaiming herself piece by piece. That night they ate in comfortable silence, both tired from the day. When they finally went to bed, the awkwardness from the night before was less. Still present, still careful, but manageable. We did all right today, Caleb said into the darkness. We did. Tomorrow, we do it again. And the day after. That's how you build something, day after day after day. She understood what he meant. This wasn't romance or passion or any of the things people wrote poems about. This was work. Deliberate, exhausting, essential work. Building trust and partnership through repetition and reliability. Maybe that was better than romance, more honest at least. She fell asleep thinking about spring, about calves being born and grass growing and the land coming back to life, about all the work ahead and whether they'd be strong enough to meet it. Outside the wind picked up, rattling the windows, reminding them that winter wasn't finished yet. But inside the cabin was warm, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, Alara felt like she might actually have found what she'd been looking for. Not safety, not comfort, but partnership, purpose. A reason to keep fighting that extended beyond just surviving one more day. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to build on, and building was what they did best. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was equal parts exhausting and essential. Every morning before dawn, Caleb would wake first, build the fire, start coffee. Alara would rise shortly after, and together they'd move through the work that kept them alive, feeding animals, collecting eggs, hauling water, checking fence lines that winter had damaged. She learned by doing. Learned that horses could sense fear and uncertainty, that cattle were stupider than they looked but more dangerous when cornered, that cold could kill you in a dozen different ways if you stopped respecting it. Caleb taught without coddling. When she made mistakes, and she made plenty, he'd correct her once, clearly, then expect her to remember. When she did something right, he'd give a short nod, nothing more. It wasn't warm, but it was honest, and she'd take honest over empty praise any day. 3 weeks into the marriage, Martha came by with supplies from town and news that was less welcome. There's talk, she said without preamble, settling into a chair while Alara made tea. About you two. About how fast you married. Let them talk, Caleb said from where he was cleaning his rifle near the window. I'm not saying stop them. I'm saying be aware. Some are calling it scandalous. Others are calling it desperate. A few are taking bets on how long before one of you leaves. What are the odds? Alara asked, trying to keep her tone light. 3 to 1 you're gone by summer. 5 to 1 he is. Martha accepted the tea. I put money on you both staying, so don't make me lose it. We're not going anywhere, Caleb said flatly. Good. Because Brennan's been asking questions about your finances, your stock numbers, how much debt you're carrying. He's looking for weakness. Let him look. He won't find any. Won't he? Martha's gaze was sharp. Because I know what you borrowed to get through last winter, and I know what you lost. You're operating on thin margins, Caleb. One bad season, and you're finished. I'm aware of my situation. Are you? Or are you too proud to see it? She set down her cup. I'm not saying sell to him. I'm saying be realistic. Have a backup plan. The plan is to survive. That's not a plan. That's hope. Martha stood, pulled her coat back on. But it's your land, your choice. Just don't let pride kill you both. After she left, Alara found Caleb still at the window, staring out at nothing. "How bad is it?" she asked. "The finances." "Bad enough." He didn't turn around. "I borrowed against future stock to cover last winter's losses. If this spring's calving goes poorly, if we lose too many head, I can't make the payment." "What happens then?" "Then the bank owns the land, and Brennan buys it from them for pennies on the dollar." His jaw tightened. That's what he's waiting for. Why he keeps making offers. He knows I'm hanging by a thread. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you'd just gotten here. Because you'd already risked everything to come. Because—" He stopped, started over. "Because I was ashamed. Of needing help. Of not being able to handle this alone." She crossed to him, made him look at her. "We're partners. That means we face problems together. No more hiding things because of pride or shame or whatever else. Understood?" "Understood." "So what do we need? To make the payment, to survive spring, what's the number?" He told her. It was worse than she'd expected, but not impossible. If they were lucky, if everything went right, if a dozen variables aligned in their favor. "Then we work," she said. "We do everything we can to make those numbers happen, and if we fail together. You should have stayed in Philadelphia. I should have frozen to death in that storm. But I didn't. So we deal with what is, not what should have been." Something in his expression eased. Not relief exactly, but the kind of surrender that comes from finally sharing a burden that's been too heavy to carry alone. "All right, Isam," he said. "We work." March arrived with false promises of warmth that lasted maybe 3 days before winter reasserted itself with a late storm that buried them for another week. They spent the time inside doing maintenance work, mending tack, organizing supplies, going over accounts that were depressing no matter how many times they reviewed them. "We need every calf to survive," Caleb said, pencil scratching across paper. "Every single one. And we need the spring market prices to hold steady. Any drop and we're short." "What if we sold some of the horses?" "Need them for work. Can't run cattle without horses." "The chickens?" "Bring in more value alive than sold. Eggs are currency out here." She studied the numbers over his shoulder. "What about taking on temporary work? Hiring out to other ranches during branding season?" "That's time away from our own operation. We fall behind. We lose more than we'd gain." Every solution created new problems. It was like trying to patch a dam while water kept rising. The storm finally broke on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, they were back outside, assessing damage. A section of fence had collapsed under snow weight. Part of the barn roof had developed a leak, and when they checked the cattle, huddled in the shelter of a tree line, they found 2 dead, frozen where they'd fallen, too weak to survive the cold. Caleb stood over them, silent, his face carved from stone. "That's $400, he said finally. "Just gone." Alara didn't know what to say. Sorry felt inadequate. Optimistic platitudes would have been insulting, so she just stood beside him, sharing the loss, the weight of it. "We keep going," she said after a while. "Do we? Or do we admit defeat and walk away while we still can?" "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" He turned to her. "Look at this. Alara. Really look. We're barely surviving 1 bad week and we lost 2 head. Spring hasn't even started and we're already behind. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe this is just desperation wearing a wedding ring." The words hit like a slap. Not because they were cruel, but because she heard the fear underneath them. The exhaustion. The accumulated weight of years spent fighting alone. "You want to quit?" she asked quietly. "Then quit. Sign the papers, sell to Brennan, walk away. I won't stop you." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What else is there? If you're done fighting, you're done. I can't fight for you." She held his gaze. "But I'm not quitting. I walked through a blizzard to get here. I married you knowing it would be hard. And I meant what I said about partnership, so if you're giving up, fine, but don't expect me to give up with you." He stared at her, angry now, properly angry, which was better than defeat. "You don't understand what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Make me understand why losing 2 cows means losing everything. Because it's not just 2 cows. It's 5 years of work, of sacrifice, of watching everything I built slowly crumble. It's my brother dying, and my parents giving up, and me standing here alone trying to hold it all together with nothing but stubbornness. His voice rose. It's you showing up and giving me hope I can't afford to have because hope makes the fall hurt worse when it comes. The words hung between them, raw and honest and more real than anything they'd said to each other yet. You think I don't know about falling? Elara's voice shook. I lost my father. Watched my mother choose a new husband over her own daughter. Tried and failed to make something of myself in a city that wanted me decorative or desperate, nothing in between. I know exactly what it's like to stand on the edge and wonder if jumping would be easier than fighting. So why didn't you jump? Because spite is stronger than despair. Because I refused to let them win. Because I decided I'd rather die trying than live giving up. She moved closer. You want to quit? Fine. But don't do it because you're tired. Do it because you actually believe there's nothing worth fighting for here. What if there isn't? Then we've both wasted our time. But I don't think we have. I think you're scared. And I think you've been scared so long you've forgotten what hope looks like. He looked away, jaw working. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped. What if I fail you? What if you don't? That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. She touched his arm, felt him tense, then relax slightly. We're going to fail at things, Caleb. That's guaranteed. The question is whether we fail separately or together. I prefer together. The anger drained out of him, leaving only exhaustion. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. So we figure it out. She squeezed his arm. Starting with burying these cows and fixing that fence, one thing at a time. That simple? That hard. But yes, they buried the dead cattle, fixed the fence, patched the roof. The work was brutal, but it was work, and work had a way of making problems tangible instead of overwhelming. You couldn't fix everything, but you could fix one thing, then another, until the list got shorter instead of longer. That night, they collapsed into bed too tired to maintain the careful distance they'd been preserving. Elara woke sometime in the dark to find herself pressed against Caleb's back, his warmth solid and real. She should have moved, maintained propriety. Instead, she stayed there, letting herself take comfort in not being alone. When she woke at dawn, he was already up, but the blankets on his side were still warm. Progress came in strange forms. 2 days later, they found the first signs that spring was actually coming, patches of bare ground where snow had melted, the creek starting to thaw and run, birds returning from wherever they'd hidden during the worst of winter. And with spring came calving season. The first calf arrived on a Tuesday morning, healthy and strong, from a cow that knew what she was doing. Caleb checked it over, pronounced it good, moved on to monitoring the others. How many are we expecting? Elara asked. 23 cows were bred last year, so 23 calves if we're lucky, fewer if we're not. What can I do? Watch, learn. Some will need help birthing, most won't. You need to know the difference. She watched. For 3 days she watched as cows labored and delivered, as new life stumbled onto shaky legs and found its mother's milk. It was messy and brutal and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with prettiness. On the 4th day they had their first problem. A young cow, first pregnancy, struggling with a calf that wouldn't come. Caleb worked for an hour trying to turn it, finally managed, pulled it free covered in blood and birth fluid. The calf wasn't breathing. No, Caleb muttered, laying it out, rubbing it hard with dry grass. Come on, breathe. Nothing. He kept trying, desperate now, and Elara saw in his face all the accumulated losses, all the fear that this would be the thing that broke them. She knelt beside him. Let me try something. What? Something my father showed me once. For human babies, but maybe... She didn't finish, just tilted the calf's head back, cleared its mouth, covered its nose and mouth with her own mouth, and blew. Elara. She ignored him, blew again, felt the small chest rise, waited, blew again. The calf jerked, coughed, started breathing on its own. Caleb stared. How did you... Medical training, sort of. She wiped her mouth, tasted birth fluid and dirt. My father delivered babies sometimes. Showed me what to do when they wouldn't breathe on their own. Figured it might work on calves. It worked. Yeah, it did. They watched the calf struggle to its feet, watched the mother start licking it clean, watched life insist on continuing despite everything that tried to stop it. That's one more, Caleb said quietly. One more that survived. That's right. He looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Seeing her not as the desperate woman from the letters, but as an actual partner who brought skills he didn't have. Thank you, he said. We're partners. That's what partners do. Over the next 2 weeks, they delivered 21 more calves. Lost one in the birthing, lost another 3 days later to something Alara couldn't diagnose with her limited knowledge. But 20 calves survived, 20 new lives that represented hope, income, possibility. The numbers were still tight, but they were manageable. If the market held. If nothing else went wrong. If. It's enough, Caleb said, reviewing the accounts. Just barely, but enough. We make it to sale time, we can cover the debt. That's good. It's survival, not success, but survival. Survival counts. It did. But Alara was starting to understand the difference between surviving and actually living, between making it through another day and building towards something better. They were doing the former. She wanted the latter. The first time they went to town together was in late March, roads finally clear enough for the wagon. Silver Pine looked smaller than Alara had imagined, a single muddy street lined with rough buildings, everything weathered and temporary looking despite years of establishment. People stopped and stared when they rolled in. Whispers followed them like shadows. Ignore it, Caleb muttered. Just do what we came for. They stopped at the general store first. Martha greeted them with her usual directness. Well, you're both still alive. That's something. We're tougher than we look, Alara said. You'd have to be. Martha pulled out her ledger. What do you need? While Caleb handled the supply order, Alara wandered the store. It was packed with everything a frontier community might need. Tools, fabric, food, ammunition, medicine. She studied the medicine section, noting what they had and didn't have, making mental notes. A woman entered, maybe 30, well-dressed by territory standards. She glanced at Alara, then away, then back with open calculation. You're the new Mrs. Rourke, she said, not a question. I am. Sarah Brennan, Thomas Brennan's daughter-in-law, James's wife. Understanding clicked. Enemy territory, or close to it. Alara kept her expression neutral. Nice to meet you. Is it? Sarah's smile was sharp. I heard about you, the woman who nearly died getting here. Very dramatic. It wasn't intentional. Still, makes quite an impression. Sarah moved closer, lowering her voice. You should know, my husband isn't going to stop pushing for your land. Neither is my father-in-law. They're just waiting for you to fail. Then they'll be waiting a long time. Will they? Because I see a woman who doesn't know anything about ranching married to a man who's barely held on this long. That's not a recipe for success. Alara met her eyes. And yet here I am, still standing. For now. Sarah's smile didn't waver. But winter comes every year, and it's cruel to people who don't belong. Good thing I belong then. She walked away before Sarah could respond, rejoining Caleb at the counter. He glanced at her, reading something in her expression. What happened? Nothing important, just the welcome wagon. They loaded supplies, headed home. Alara was quiet, processing the encounter, understanding that the threats weren't all going to be obvious. Some would come dressed as concern or friendly advice. Some would come from other women who saw her as competition or outsider, or both. Sarah Brennan talked to you, Caleb said, not a question. She did. What did she say? That we're going to fail, that I don't belong, the usual. And what did you say? That she's wrong. He almost smiled. Good. But the encounter stayed with Alara, nagging at her. She'd handled it fine in the moment, but it represented something larger, a community that was still deciding whether to accept or reject her, still watching for failure, still skeptical of the outsider who'd arrived so dramatically. She needed to prove herself. Not to Caleb, she'd already done that through work, but to the town, to the other ranchers, to everyone who'd taken bets on how long she'd last. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A week after the town visit, Peter Donnelly showed up at their door looking worried. "Caleb, we need help. Doc Harris is drunk again and Martha's boy cut his leg bad. Needs stitching. She said you've got a wife with medical training?" Alara was already grabbing supplies before Caleb could respond. "How bad is the cut?" "Bad enough. Lot of blood. He's only 12. Let's go." They rode hard to the Kincaid place, a homestead 3 miles north that Alara had never seen. Martha met them at the door, face pale. He was splitting wood. Axe slipped. She led them to a back room where a boy lay on a bed, his leg wrapped in towels that were soaked through with red. Alara pushed past the fear, let training take over. "I need clean water, clean cloth, needle and thread, the finest you have, and whiskey. I don't have medical supplies." Then regular supplies, just clean, and boiled if possible. While Martha rushed to gather materials, Alara unwrapped the leg. The cut was deep, maybe 4 inches long, gaping open to show muscle beneath, but it had missed the major vessels. Lucky. "What's your name?" she asked the boy. "Thomas. Everyone calls me Tommy." "Well, Tommy, this is going to hurt. A lot. But I need you to stay still. Can you do that?" He nodded, terrified. "Good. You're braver than most grown men I've known." She cleaned the wound, using whiskey to sterilize despite Tommy's yelps of pain. Then she threaded the needle, regular sewing needle, thicker than she'd like, but it would work, and started stitching. Her hands remembered the motions her father had taught her, small, tight stitches, pulling the edges together, being careful not to pull too tight or leave gaps. Tommy cried but stayed still, Martha holding his hand, whispering encouragement. 23 stitches later it was done. Not pretty, but functional. She wrapped it clean, gave Martha instructions for care. "Change the bandage daily. Keep it clean. Watch for infection, redness, heat, red streaks moving up the leg. If you see any of that, come get me immediately." "You did this before?" Martha asked. "I've stitched plenty of wounds, first time on a child this young, but the principle's the same. Doc Harris would have refused, said it needed surgery, charged a fortune, done it drunk. Then it's good I was available." Martha looked at her for a long moment. "You just earned respect in this community. Word's going to spread." "I didn't do it for respect." "I know, that's why you'll get it." They stayed another hour, making sure Tommy was stable, answering questions. By the time they left, full dark had fallen and Alara was exhausted. But it was the good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from doing something that mattered. "You were right," Caleb said on the ride home, "about pulling your weight. You just proved it to everyone. I just helped a kid who needed help. Out here, that's everything." Over the next week, 3 more people showed up needing medical attention. Minor things. An infected wound, a suspected broken finger, a bad fever. Alara treated them all, charging nothing, just helping because she could. Word spread. The woman who'd walked through a blizzard could also stitch wounds and diagnose illness. The outsider who didn't belong was making herself essential. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was a start. Late April brought news that couldn't be ignored. Caleb returned from checking the north fence line, looking grim. "Brennan's moving cattle onto disputed land," he said. "The section by the creek that's technically open range, but everyone knows is ours. Can he do that?" "Legally, maybe. The boundaries are fuzzy there, but it's a power play, testing us." "What do we do?" "We move them back, make it clear we're not ceding territory. And if he moves them again, then we keep moving them until he gets tired of the game or escalates." Caleb checked his rifle. "I'm riding out tomorrow to deal with it." "Not alone, Alara, not alone," she repeated. "That's what partnership means. We face problems together." He wanted to argue. She could see it in his face, But he also recognized the truth in what she said. All right, together. They rode out at dawn, found maybe 30 head of Brennan cattle grazing near the creek. Caleb worked them efficiently, pushing them back toward Brennan land while Ilara helped from the other side, learning by doing, getting the feel for moving stock. They were almost done when riders appeared, James Brennan and 2 of his men, all armed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" James demanded. "Moving your cattle off my land," Caleb said evenly. "This isn't your land, it's open range." "Then why are only your cattle here?" "Because we got here first. And now you're leaving." Caleb kept his voice level, but Ilara could see the tension in his shoulders. James's hand moved toward his rifle. "You don't give me orders, Rourke." "I'm not giving orders, I'm enforcing boundaries." "You've got nothing to enforce with, just you and a woman who doesn't know her place." Ilara urged her horse forward before Caleb could respond. "My place is right here, beside my husband, defending our land." "You have a problem with that?" James sneered. "You're playing at being a rancher. When this falls apart, and it will, you'll run back east where you belong. I walked through a blizzard to get here. I married him knowing it would be hard, and I've spent every day since proving I can handle this life." She held his gaze. "You want to test that? Go ahead. But you'll lose." The 2 hired hands looked uncomfortable. Even James seemed taken aback by her directness. "This isn't over," he said finally. "No," Caleb agreed. "But this conversation is, move your cattle and go." For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Then James yanked his horse around, gestured for his men to follow, and rode off without another word. The cattle were moved. The point was made. On the ride home, Caleb was quiet. Finally, he said, "That was reckless. That was necessary. You could have gotten hurt. So could you, but we didn't." She looked at him. "You wanted a partner. That means I stand beside you when it gets ugly. Not behind you, not safely home. Beside." He nodded slowly. "All right. Besides," she added, trying to lighten the moment, "someone had to defend your honor. You were being too polite." That got almost a smile. "I'll work on being less polite." "Don't. It's one of your better qualities." The smile reached his eyes this time. Small, brief, but real. Something had shifted between them. All the work, all the shared struggles, all the moments of standing together against whatever came. It was building something beyond simple partnership. Not love, maybe not yet. But trust. Respect. The foundation that love could grow from if they gave it time. That night they lay in bed, closer than usual, the careful distance finally abandoned as unnecessary. "Thank you," Caleb said into the dark, "for today, for standing with me." That's what wives do. Is it? Because most wives I know don't face down armed men or stitch wounds or save dying calves. Then most wives aren't married to stubborn ranchers on disputed land. He laughed quietly. "Fair point." Silence settled, comfortable now. Ilara felt his warmth beside her, solid and real. Felt the exhaustion of the day pulling her toward sleep. Felt something else too, something that might have been contentment or satisfaction or just the simple relief of not being alone in the fight. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad I came. Glad I stayed. Even with everything being hard. I'm glad." His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezed once. "So am I." It wasn't poetry, wasn't dramatic declaration, but it was honest, and honest was their language. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the last cold breath of winter with it. But inside the cabin was warm, and between them, something stronger than survival was beginning to take root. They'd figure out what to call it eventually. For now, it was enough that it existed at all. May arrived with warmth that felt almost aggressive after the months of cold. The land transformed overnight, grass pushing through thawed earth, wildflowers dotting the meadows, the creek running full and loud. It was the kind of beauty that made you forget winter's brutality, which Ilara was learning was dangerous. Forgetting meant you stopped preparing, and stopping preparation out here meant dying. They were 2 weeks from the cattle sale when Thomas Brennan showed up alone, which was unusual enough to put Caleb on alert. He rode in slowly, hands visible, making it clear he wasn't looking for confrontation. "Rourke," he called from a respectful distance. "Got a minute?" Caleb wiped his hands on his pants, nodded. Alara stayed on the porch, close enough to hear but giving them space. She'd learned that some conversations went better without her presence making things complicated. "What can I do for you?" Caleb asked. Brennan dismounted, tied his horse. Up close, he looked older than Alara remembered. The lines deeper, the gray more pronounced. Tired, maybe. Or just worn down by whatever he was carrying. "I came to apologize," Brennan said. "For my son, for the cattle situation, for pushing when I should have backed off." Caleb's expression didn't change, but Alara saw the surprise in how still he went. "That's unexpected." "It is, but it's overdue." Brennan looked out across the property, taking in the repaired fences, the healthy cattle, the signs of work done right. "You've made something good here, against odds that would have broken most men. I've been so focused on what I wanted that I stopped seeing what you'd built." "You're still after the land." "I am. Would be lying if I said otherwise." Brennan turned back to him. "But I'm done trying to take it from you. If you ever want to sell, my offer stands. Fair price, no pressure. But I won't push anymore. And I'll make sure James understands that too." "Will he listen?" "He'll listen, or he'll lose his inheritance. I've already told him as much." Brennan's jaw tightened. "My son has his mother's temper and my stubbornness. Bad combination. But he's not stupid. When I lay down the law, he follows it." Caleb studied him for a long moment. "Why now? Why the change?" "Because I got a letter from my brother. Haven't heard from him in 15 years, not since we had a falling out over our father's will. He's dying now, cancer. And his letter said he regretted the time we wasted fighting over things that didn't matter." Brennan's voice roughened. "Made me think about what I'm doing here, what I'm teaching my son, whether holding on to old grudges and wanting more land is worth dying with regrets." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Caleb extended his hand. "I appreciate you coming here, telling me this." Brennan shook it. "I'm still your competition. When market time comes, I'll be fighting for the same prices, same buyers. But I'll fight fair. And if you need help, real help, not charity, you ask. Neighbors should look out for each other, even when they're competing." Agreed. After Brennan left, Alara joined Caleb in the yard. "You believe him?" "I do. That's not a speech you make if you're still planning to sabotage someone." He looked at her. "Things just got easier. Or more complicated." "How so?" "Because now if we fail, it's entirely on us. No one to blame but ourselves." He almost smiled. "You always this optimistic?" "I'm realistic. There's a difference." She leaned against the fence rail. "But he's right about one thing. We have built something good here, against terrible odds. That counts for something." "Does it? We're still barely surviving." "Surviving is how you start. Building is what comes next." She watched the cattle grazing in the distance. "We've been so focused on just making it through each day that we haven't thought about what comes after. What we actually want this to become." "What do you want it to become?" She'd been thinking about that question for weeks without admitting it, even to herself. "I want it to be more than just survival. I want to expand. Buy more land when we can afford it. Build a real house, not just this cabin. Maybe raise horses seriously, not just for work. Create something that lasts beyond us." "That's ambitious." "Is it? Or is it just the logical next step?" She turned to face him. "You've been thinking small because you've been alone, thinking about just holding on. But we're not alone anymore. We can think bigger." "Thinking bigger requires capital we don't have." "Not yet. But the cattle sale will give us breathing room. Then we plan. We save. We invest carefully." Her mind was already working through possibilities. "And I can bring in money too. People are already coming to me for medical help. I could make that official, charge for services, build a small practice." "Doc Harris won't like that. Doc Harris is drunk half the time and incompetent the other half. The town needs better. I can provide better." He studied her like he was seeing something new. You've changed since you got here. You're harder, more confident. I had to be. This place doesn't allow soft. She held his gaze. But I'm also happier. Even with everything being difficult, I'm happier than I've been in years. Because I'm building something real. With you. Something shifted in his expression, softened. I'm happier too. Didn't think I'd ever say that again, but I am. The moment hung between them, full of potential, and Alara made a choice. She crossed to him, put her hand on his chest, felt his heartbeat steady and strong. We've been married 4 months, sleeping in the same bed for weeks, being careful and respectful and giving each other space. That's what you wanted, time to heal. I'm healed. She looked up at him. And I think we've earned moving past careful. His hand came up to cover hers. You're sure? I'm sure. He kissed her then, properly. Not the chaste press of lips from their wedding, but something real and present and full of all the accumulated want from months of proximity and partnership. She kissed him back, feeling the warmth of it spread through her chest, feeling something that had been theoretical become tangible. When they broke apart, he was smiling, actually smiling, broad and genuine. We should have done that weeks ago. Probably. But the timing's better now. Now we know what we're building together. That night was different, not perfect, first times rarely were, but honest and human and theirs. And in the morning, when they woke tangled together, there was no awkwardness, no regret. Just two people who'd chosen each other and were finally acting like it. The cattle sale happened on a blazing hot day in mid-May. Caleb had spent weeks preparing, assessing each animal, selecting the ones to sell, keeping the breeding stock they'd need for next year. The math had to work perfectly. Too few sold and they couldn't make the payment. Too many and they'd be starting from scratch next spring. They drove the cattle to Silver Pine in the pre-dawn dark, arriving as buyers were setting up. Thomas Brennan was there with his stock, gave Caleb a nod of acknowledgement. Other ranchers were there too, all competing for the same buyer's attention. Alara stayed near the wagon, watching Caleb work the crowd. He was good at this, direct, honest about his stock's quality, negotiating without desperation. She saw the moment he closed the deal, saw the buyer counting out bills, saw Caleb's shoulders relax fractionally. He came back looking cautiously pleased. We did it. Covered the debt with enough left over for supplies and a small cushion. How small? Small enough that one bad month would wipe it out, but bigger than we've had in years. Then we build from there. They celebrated that night with a dinner that was only slightly better than usual, fresh meat instead of dried, bread from the store instead of their own rough loaves. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt earned, and earned mattered more than extravagant. What now? Alara asked over coffee. Now we work. Prepare for next winter. Start planning for expansion like you talked about. I've been thinking about the horse idea. There's a market for good working horses. If we bred selectively, built a reputation for quality, that takes years. Everything takes years doesn't mean we shouldn't start. He considered it. We'd need a better barn, more space, and we'd need to buy breeding stock that we can't afford yet. Not yet, but maybe by next year or the year after. She leaned forward. I'm not saying rush into it. I'm saying start planning, start learning. So when we have the capital, we're ready. You think like your father, don't you? The doctor, always planning ahead, seeing the long game. I think like someone who's tired of just surviving. I want to build something that matters, don't you? I do. I just... He stopped, started over. I've spent so long thinking small, protecting what I had, that thinking big feels dangerous. It is dangerous, but so is never taking risks. My father used to say the safest bet is also the one that guarantees you never win big. She reached across the table, took his hand. We're good together, Caleb, at working, at planning, at facing problems. Let's use that. Let's build something worth having instead of just something we're afraid to lose. He turned her hand over, studying her palm, the calluses that had formed from months of work, the faint scars from countless small injuries. Working hands now, not the soft hands of the woman who'd arrived in February. All right, he said. We plan big, but we execute small, careful. No risks we can't afford. Agreed. June brought a surprise neither of them expected. Alara missed her monthly cycle, then missed it again. She'd been so focused on work, on survival, on building their partnership that she hadn't paid attention to her own body until the signs were impossible to ignore. She told Caleb on a Sunday evening after dinner when they were sitting outside watching the sun set over the mountains. "I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. "About 8 weeks, I think." He went completely still. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I know the signs, and I've been feeling them for a couple weeks, but didn't want to say anything until I was certain." "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified, excited, worried about a dozen practical things." She looked at him. "How do you feel?" "Same. All of those." He scrubbed a hand across his face. "A baby. Here. That's complicated, I know." She'd been running through the implications since she'd figured it out. "I'll need to be careful. No heavy lifting after a certain point. We'll need supplies I don't have. And we'll need to figure out how to manage work when I can't do as much." "We'll manage." His voice was rough. "We've managed everything else. This is different." "It is, but it's also—" He stopped, seemed to be struggling with something. "My brother's death, my parents giving up, 5 years of being alone. I'd convinced myself this was it, that I'd die here alone having built something that would just get sold off to pay debts. But now there's you, and there's going to be a baby. That's legacy. That's future. That's everything I thought I'd lost." She hadn't expected the emotion in his voice, hadn't expected to see tears in his eyes, quickly blinked away but real. "We're building something together," she said. "That's what we promised. This is just another part of it. The most important part. Maybe, but also the scariest." "Yeah, that too." They sat together as the light faded, both processing what this meant. A child growing in harsh conditions, the responsibility of another life, the vulnerability that came with caring about something so completely, but also hope. Actual, tangible hope for a future that extended beyond just surviving the next winter. The news spread through Silverpine faster than Alara expected. Martha showed up 3 days later with fabric for baby clothes and advice that was equal parts practical and terrifying. "You'll need help when the time comes," she said. "Doc Harris can't be trusted with something this important. I've birthed 4 babies and helped deliver a dozen more. I'll be there. Thank you." Alara felt relief wash through her. She'd been worried about that exact thing, giving birth out here with no one competent to help. "And you'll need to take it easier as you get further along. That means Caleb needs to hire help. At least one hand, maybe 2. We can't afford—" "You can't afford not to. Not with a baby coming. You fall behind on work, you lose ground, you can't make up. Better to hire now while you're ahead than wait until desperation makes you pay more." She was right. They both knew it, which meant more expense, more risk, more variables to manage. But Martha was also right about something else. They couldn't do this alone anymore. They needed community, they needed help, and they needed to start accepting that asking for help wasn't weakness. Caleb hired a young man named Ben Cooper, fresh from Missouri, looking for work and experience. He was green but willing, and he had the kind of eager energy that made him worth training. "You'll sleep in the barn," Caleb told him. "Work is dawn to dusk, 6 days a week. Sundays are yours. Pay is $15 a month plus food. We can't offer more right now." "That's fair," Ben said. He couldn't have been more than 19, all lanky height and unearned optimism. "I'll work hard. Won't let you down. See that you don't." Having help changed the dynamics. Caleb could focus on the harder tasks while Ben handled basics. Alara could step back from physical work as her pregnancy progressed, focusing instead on the domestic tasks and the informal medical practice that was growing whether she planned it or not. People kept showing up, injuries, illnesses, questions about health. She treated them when she could, referred them to actual doctors when she couldn't. Word spread that the Rourke woman knew medicine, could be trusted, didn't charge unfairly. It became additional income. Not much, but steady. And it gave her purpose beyond just ranch work. Summer passed in a blur of heat and work and preparation. They built additions to the barn, repaired the cabin roof, started planning for the house they'd build next year if the money held. Alara's belly grew, making movement awkward, making everything take longer. But the baby was healthy, strong. She could feel it moving, fighting against confinement, demanding space. She liked to think it had inherited stubbornness from both of them. Late August brought unexpected visitors. A man and woman on horseback, well-dressed, traveling with purpose. They stopped at the property line, called out for permission to approach. Caleb went to meet them, Alara following more slowly, one hand on her swollen belly. The man dismounted, extended his hand. "Caleb Rourke, I'm Michael Whitmore. This is my wife, Catherine. I believe you married my sister." Alara froze. Michael, her brother. She hadn't seen him since their father's funeral 5 years ago, hadn't heard from him since he'd moved to California chasing some business opportunity. "Michael?" She heard the shock in her own voice. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you." He crossed to her, stopped a few feet away, taking in her appearance. The worn dress, the pregnant belly, the rough hands. "Mother wrote, said you'd gone west, married some rancher. I had to see if you were all right." "I'm fine, more than fine. Are you?" His eyes were concerned, not judgmental. "Because you disappeared. Cut everyone off. We were worried." "Were you? Or did Mother just not like how it looked, her daughter running off?" "Both." He said it honest. "She's not good at showing it, but she did worry. So did I." Catherine stepped forward then. "We're not here to judge or criticize. Michael just wanted to make sure you were safe, happy, that you chose this rather than ran to it." Alara looked at her brother, older now, more settled, but still recognizably the person she'd grown up with. "I chose this. Every part of it. I'm happier than I've ever been." "Then I'm glad." Michael glanced at Caleb. "He treating you right?" "We treat each other right. It's a partnership." "Good. That's good." Michael seemed to relax slightly. "We're staying in Silver Pine for a few days. Would you have dinner with us? Let us get to know your husband. Let me actually be your brother instead of a stranger." She wanted to refuse, wanted to protect the life she'd built from the complications of family, of past connections. But she also saw the genuine concern in Michael's face, remembered that he'd been the one family member who'd tried to help after their father died, even if his help had been inadequate. "Tomorrow night," she said. "Come here. I'll cook. You can see what we've built." They came as promised, and the dinner was awkward at first. Too much history, too much unsaid. But Caleb's straightforward manner and Michael's genuine interest in the ranch created common ground. By the end of the evening, they were talking like people who might actually become friends given time. "You've built something real here," Michael said. "Against odds I can't even imagine. I'm impressed." "We got lucky," Caleb said. "And we worked hard. Sometimes that's enough." "It's more than most people manage." Michael turned to Alara. "I owe you an apology for not fighting harder when Mother remarried, for letting you face that alone. I was young and stupid and focused on my own problems. We all were. Young and stupid." Alara felt something ease in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. "But I'm not angry anymore. Too much else to focus on." Before they left, Michael pulled out a bank draft. "This is from Father's estate, your share. I've been holding it because I didn't know where you were. It's not much, but..." "How much?" Alara interrupted. 3,000. She stared. "That's not much. That's everything. It's what you're owed, what you should have had years ago." He pressed it into her hand. "Use it well. Build something even bigger." After they left, Alara and Caleb sat on the porch, both processing what had just happened. $3,000, Caleb said finally. "That changes everything." "It does." Her mind was already racing. "We can buy breeding stock, build the house, maybe even buy additional land if anything comes available. We can get ahead instead of just staying even. We can build that future we talked about." They sat in silence for a while, both understanding the magnitude of the gift, the opportunity it represented. "Your brother's good people," Caleb said. "He is. I'd forgotten that. Let anger at the whole family blind me to who he actually was. You gonna stay in touch? I think so, carefully, but yes. She took his hand. Family's complicated, but maybe it doesn't have to be cut off entirely. Maybe there's middle ground. September came cool and beautiful. Alara was huge now, uncomfortable, ready for the pregnancy to be over. But the baby wasn't quite ready, stubbornly staying put despite her increasingly urgent hints that eviction was welcome. They used the money from Michael wisely, bought 2 quality mares for breeding, purchased materials for the house they'd build come spring, set aside reserves for winter. And they hired another hand, an older man named Sam, who'd worked ranches his whole life and knew more than Caleb and Ben combined. The operation was expanding, growing from desperate survival into something that might actually be called successful. The baby came on a cold night in late September, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Alara woke to cramping that she initially dismissed, then couldn't, then realized meant labor was starting. Caleb. She shook him awake. It's time. He was up immediately, moving with purpose. I'll get Martha. You don't have time, this is moving fast. Another contraction hit, stronger. You're going to have to help me. Fear flashed across his face. I don't know how. I'll tell you what to do. Just stay calm and listen. It was the longest night of both their lives. Alara labored for hours, Caleb doing his best to help despite his obvious terror. When Martha finally arrived near dawn, Ben had ridden for her once it became clear Caleb couldn't leave. The baby was already crowning. You two couldn't wait? Martha said, but she was smiling. All right, Alara. You know what to do. Push. She pushed, screamed, pushed again, and then suddenly there was a baby, red and furious and very much alive, announcing her displeasure at the world with impressive volume. It's a girl, Martha said, cleaning her off, wrapping her in the blanket they'd prepared. And she's got healthy lungs. Alara held her daughter, impossibly small, impossibly perfect, already making demands. She looked at Caleb, saw tears on his face, saw wonder and terror and fierce protectiveness all at once. We made this, she said. We made her. We did. His voice broke. She's perfect. She's ours. They named her Clara, after Alara's father, the doctor who'd taught his daughter to survive in a world that didn't want her educated. It felt right. Felt like honoring the past while building toward the future. The first weeks were brutal. Clara screamed constantly, demanded feeding every few hours, turned their sleep schedule into chaos. But she was also alive, healthy, growing, evidence that they'd created something that would outlast them both. Winter came again, the second one Alara faced in Montana. But this time she was prepared. This time they had reserves, hired help, systems in place. And this time she had Caleb beside her, not as a stranger she'd married out of desperation, but as a partner she'd chosen to build a life with. 1 year to the day after the blizzard that nearly killed her, Alara stood on the porch holding Clara, watching Caleb and the hired hands work the cattle in the distance. The land was frozen again, harsh and unforgiving, but the cabin was warm, the barn was full. They had money in reserve, plans for expansion, a future that looked possible instead of desperate. She thought about the woman who'd walked into that storm, proud and stubborn, and running from failure. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder and stronger and more capable. Someone who'd learned that survival wasn't the goal. Building was the goal. Creating something worth surviving for. Caleb came up to the porch, stamping snow off his boots. What are you thinking about? About a year ago. About how different everything is. Regret any of it? Not even a little. You? No. He looked out at the property. We've got a long way to go, but we're heading the right direction. We are. Clara started fussing, and Alara shifted her, soothing. We should go inside, she's getting cold. In a minute. Caleb put his arm around her shoulders, pulled her close. I just want to stand here, remember what we started with. Appreciate what we've built. So they stood there together, husband, wife, daughter, on land they'd fought for, in a life they'd built from nothing but determination and the refusal to quit. It wasn't perfect. Would never be perfect. But it was theirs, earned through work and risk and the willingness to believe that two stubborn people who'd started as strangers could become something stronger together than they'd ever been alone. The wind howled around them, bitter and cold. But inside they'd be warm, and tomorrow they'd wake up and do it all again. That was the lesson Alara had learned out here in the frozen spine of the frontier. You didn't survive by hoping for easy. You survived by accepting hard and doing the work anyway. By standing beside your partner and facing whatever came together. By building something worth having even when everything tried to tear it down. She'd walked into a blizzard to find a life worth living. And against all odds, in a harsh land that broke most people, she'd found it. Not in safety or comfort, but in partnership and purpose. In the daily work of choosing each other, choosing this place, choosing to build instead of run. That was the real victory. Not surviving the storm, though that mattered, but building something afterward that made the survival worthwhile, creating a legacy that would outlast them both. As they finally went inside, closing the door against the wind, Alara looked back once at the white landscape beyond. It was beautiful in its brutality, honest in its harshness, and it had made her into someone she actually wanted to be. She wouldn't change a single step of the journey that brought her here. Not the desperate letters, not the broken stagecoach, not the frozen walk that nearly killed her. Because all of it, every risk, every failure, every moment of doubt, had led to this. To a warm cabin and a healthy daughter and a partner who stood beside her through everything. That was worth any price, worth any storm. And tomorrow, when the sun rose over the mountains, they'd prove it again.